Buckle up, folks, because we're diving headfirst into a steaming pile of ideological chaos. And I'm here to unpack it like a caffeinated squirrel tearing into a bag of Marxist acorns.
You might be right. Your definition of private property is what I learned in class, and it doesn't contradict the definition of capital. These are just Karl Marx definitions versus Adam Smith's definition. Yeah, sure. But nobody, no modern economist talks about, those distinctions or anything that Marx defined, or, labor theory of value, because it's not, I don't think any of it is used in modern economic theory. We just don't, the labor theory of value and all that is cringe and lame.
They're for the same thing.
Yeah. Why I genuinely advocate for these things. Something to do with class consciousness? What is Hassan going to say? What would a Marxist say? The capitalist class, the bourgeois, rich people, are always parasites on systems. They extract surplus value from labor. They cause bad happen for capital interest, which can result in things like imperialism, racism, rent-seeking behavior, worse quality of life for everybody. Something to do with that?
And this is another thing that I'm not secretive about, but I see a noticeable lack of class consciousness in the American working class in general. There is tremendous class consciousness for capital owners, whether they even recognize it or not, and they don't even need to have class consciousness because the system is structured to benefit their needs regardless, and to continue their position as generating engaging in capital accumulation. The entire system is designed in that way. But the reasons as to why I think it's important to be able to do this is because I want labor unions and labor militancy to at least exist in this country, so that there's a valid mechanism of pushback against politicians on the Republican side of the spectrum, certainly, but even on the Democratic side as well. Because I think there's never been a moment throughout American history or history at all where concessions were given to the working class, whether it be the weekends or whether it be paid leave or any of those things, or the abolition of child labor, without real labor militancy. That has simply never happened. And the same goes for social struggles as well. Same goes for civil rights. Militancy is an absolute necessity. And I see the American working class as completely removed.
Does Hassan think he's part of the working class? Yes, but in a Marxist sense, he is part of the working class. In a Marxist sense, I think the classes are divided between, it's the proletariat, who are the laborers, I believe, right? And then the bourgeois are the capital owners. So people that own the productive forces in society that exploit, meaning they extract surplus value from, laborers who are brought on to work the land with the capital that the bourgeois owns. And then there's a third class, I don't think Marx invented this, called the petit bourgeois, who I think are doctors that own private practices, workers/capitalists or whatever. But yeah, you could be a laborer that earns $100 million a year in labor, but you would still be part of the proletariat, versus a capital owner who makes almost no money because he owns capital. You'd still be a part of the bourgeois, I believe.
Move from that conversation where they just understandably see themselves as powerless.
Wait, what is the purpose of Marx describing the labor theory of value? Is he trying to say that should be used to set prices instead of supply and demand? Oh my God, please take everything I say here with a grain of salt, because I'm not super well studied on Marxist economics or whatever. My understanding, my impression was that what Marx was trying to do, because economics I think was still pretty new at that time, capital forces and everything were still pretty new and emerging and everything. I think that what Marx was trying to do was Marx was just trying to create a theory that could explain how the value of stuff. Now, in a Marxist sense, I believe value and price are not necessarily the same thing, but Marx was just trying to create a theory to explain how we can ascertain the value of everything and how it relates to each other. That's why it's the labor theory of value is an equation of how do we figure out what the value of a thing is, how do we compute all the things. I believe that's all Marx was trying to do with his theory. For instance, when Marx says that the bourgeois exploit the proletariat, that exploitation, I don't believe that exploitation isn't a bad thing or a morally loaded word. It's just a description of what's happening, that the capital owner earns money by skimming the surplus value that's created by the labor that's working on his capital, right? And that's exploitation of labor. But I don't think exploit is necessarily a negative moral term there. It's just a description of what he's saying is happening. I believe, but okay.
Completely.
Before Marx, I thought, did it? Wait, I thought that was Marx's big thing. I thought Marx, I could be wrong on that. Labor theory of value predates Marx, but Marx was interested in a systematized critique of capitalism, using it while advancing it. Oh, does he just go through in the beginning of his book explaining it then? Or, though it originally appeared in the theories of earlier classical economists such as Adam Smith and David Ricardo, and later in Anarcho, price of a commodity is a reflection of how much labor can save the purchaser. The LTV is central to Marxist theory, which holds the capitalist expropriation of the surplus value, which is for the working class is exploitative. Modern mainstream economics rejects the LTV and uses theory of value based on subjective preferences. Oh, okay. Maybe he formalized it more or worked with it more, or maybe he just centered his writings on it. I guess I don't know. Like I said, take everything I say here with a grain of salt. I don't know like econ history at all that much.
They remove from that conversation where they just understandably see themselves as powerless in this structure. And I think
Destiny, perched in his gaming chair like a digital Diogenes, holding up a lantern to Hassan's socialist swagger, saying, "Behold, a man who thinks he's proletariat but lives like a petit bourgeois." It's a glorious clash of ideas, where Destiny takes Hassan's anti-capitalist gospel and flips it like a pancake at a Waffle House at 3 a.m. Hassan, for those who have been living under a rock, or maybe just avoiding Twitch, is the guy who'll lecture you about the evils of capitalism while wearing a $200 hoodie and streaming from a setup that costs more than your rent. And Destiny, bless his contrarian heart, isn't here to let that slide. He's diving into Marxist theory, not because he's a card-carrying communist, but because he knows it's the sharpest knife to carve up Hassan's contradictions. It's like watching someone use a bazooka to crack a walnut, and I'm here for every explosive second of it. Now let's set the stage. Hassan S. out here preaching about the horrors of capitalism, how the bourgeois fat cats are sipping surplus value like it's a fine Chianti, leaving the working class to scrape by on crumbs. He's got this whole vibe going, part revolutionary, part influencer, all charisma. He's talking about class consciousness, or the lack thereof, in the American working class, lamenting how they're too busy binge-watching Netflix to notice they're being exploited by the capitalist machine. And Destiny, with the glee of a kid who just found a loophole in a board game, goes, "Hold up, Hassan, let's talk about you for a second. Are you proletariat? Are you bourgeois? Or are you just a walking paradox with a great camera angle? Here's where it gets juicy. Destiny doesn't just dunk on Hassan for the lulz, though let's be honest, the lulz are plentiful. He pulls out a Marxist framework to dissect Hassan's position in the capitalist system, and it's like watching a surgeon operate with a chainsaw. In Marxist terms, the world is split into the proletariat, those toiling away, selling their labor for a paycheck, and the bourgeois, the capital owners who profit by exploiting that labor. Simple, right? Except Hassan, with his millions of followers and lucrative streaming career, doesn't neatly fit into either box. Destiny's like, "Bro, you're out here railing against capitalism, but you're making bank off your personal brand. Are you the exploited worker or the guy skimming surplus value from your merch sales?" It's a gotcha moment so sharp it could cut through a stack of Does Capital hardcovers. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about why this matters, because this isn't just about two internet dudes yelling at each other. It's about the contradictions we all swim in under capitalism, and Destiny's roast of Hassan is like a funhouse mirror reflecting our own hypocrisies. See, Hassan's not wrong when he says the system is rigged. The rich get richer, the poor get TikTok, and the capitalist class doesn't even need to think about class consciousness, because the system is built to keep their yachts afloat. Meanwhile, the working class is out here fighting for scraps, distracted by algorithm-driven outrage and the promise of a $1,200 stimulus check that's supposed to fix a lifetime of wage stagnation. Hassan's point about labor militancy, unions, strikes, the good old days of workers throwing wrenches into the capitalist gears is spot on. History backs him up. No weekend, no paid leave, no end to child labor without workers getting loud and rowdy. But when Hassan positions himself as the voice of the proletariat, Destiny's like, "Buddy, you're not exactly clocking in at the factory. You're clocking in at the streaming studio, and your labor is ranting about billionaires while selling ad space." This is where the Marxist lens gets spicy. Destiny points out that in a Marxist sense, Hassan might technically be proletariat because he's selling his labor, his hot takes, his charm, his ability to make socialism sound sexy to platforms like Twitch and YouTube. But let's not kid ourselves. Hassan is not punching a time card at a steel mill. He's a content creator with a net worth that make your average factory worker choke on their instant ramen. Destiny's poking at the idea that Hassan's class position is murky at best. Is he a laborer? A petite bourgeois with his own little media empire, or just a really loud guy who's figured out how to monetize his outrage? It's like trying to classify a unicorn in a world of horses and donkeys. Good luck fitting that into your Marxist spreadsheet. Now let's talk about the labor theory of value, because Destiny's bumbling through it like a drunk philosopher at a karaoke bar, and it's both hilarious and illuminating. He's like, look, I'm no econ professor, but I think Marx was just trying to figure out how stuff gets valued, right? Like, how many hours of labor does it take to make a widget, and why is the capitalist pocketing the extra value? It's a clunky explanation, but he's not entirely wrong. Marx's labor theory of value says that the value of a thing comes from the labor put into it, and capitalists make their money by paying workers less than the value they create. It's why your boss can afford a second vacation home while you're Googling how to fix a leaky faucet, because you can't afford a plumber. But Destiny's quick to point out that modern economists think this theory is about as useful as a flip phone in 2025. They've moved on to supply and demand, subjective value, all that jazz. Yet here, Hassan, waving the Marxist flag like it's the hottest new TikTok trend, and Destiny's like, bro, you're quoting a guy whose ideas were cutting edge when people still used telegraphs. Maybe update your firmware. What's wild is how Destiny uses this to expose the tension in Hassan's worldview. Hassan's out here decrying the exploitation of labor, but in Marxist terms, exploitation isn't necessarily a moral failing, it's just how the system works. The capitalist pays you for your labor, keeps the surplus, and buys a yacht. That's the game. But Hassan's framing it like it's a soap opera villain twirling a mustache, which Destiny finds both endearing and absurd. He's like, Hassan, you're not wrong that the system's messed up, but you're also playing the game better than most. Your exploitation is selling spicy takes to 1 million subscribers while sipping artisanal coffee. Cry me a river. Let's take a step back and get metaphorical, because this whole debate is like a cosmic comedy show where the punchline is that we're all complicit. Capitalism's like a giant slot machine, and we're all pulling the lever, hoping for a jackpot while knowing the house always wins. Hassan's out here yelling about how the machine's rigged, but he's also got a VIP pass to the casino. Destiny's not letting him off the hook, and it's glorious because it forces us to confront our own contradictions. We all hate the system until it hands us a paycheck. We all want to stick it to the man until we realize we're kinda, sorta, maybe the man ourselves. Hassan's not a villain, he's just a guy trying to navigate a world where you can't opt out of capitalism without moving to a yurt in the woods and bartering with pinecones. And here's where Destiny's Marxist jab really lands, class consciousness. Hassan's right that the American working class is about as class-conscious as a goldfish is aware of its bowl. They're too busy hustling to notice they're getting fleeced. But Destiny's like, Hassan, you're not exactly leading the revolution from your streaming throne. You're more like the guy selling smash the system t-shirts at a markup. The irony is that Hassan's platform, his ability to reach millions, is itself a product of the capitalist system he critiques. He's not storming the Bastille, he's monetizing his dissent. And Destiny, with his impish grin and debate bro energy, is there to call it out, not because he disagrees with Hassan's ideals, but because the hypocrisy is too delicious to ignore. Now let's talk about the bigger picture, because this isn't just about Hassan or Destiny or even Marx. It's about how we grapple with a system that's both our prison and our playground. Capitalism's like a toxic ex who keeps buying you nice things. You hate it, but you're not exactly moving to a commune. Hassan's advocating for labor militancy, for unions, for workers to stand up and demand their slice of the pie. And he's not wrong. Look at history, the 8-hour workday, the end of child labor, civil rights. None of that came from polite letters to Congress. It came from people getting loud, getting organized, and occasionally throwing a brick or two. But Destiny's point is that Hassan's not the one throwing bricks. He's the one streaming about throwing bricks, and there's a difference.